Hello, everyone. So, tonight's session in sacred sexuality is going to be reviewing some sacred sexual practices from a shamanistic viewpoint. And I'm also going to roll out some ritual psychology. So, ritual format might be a better term. I've had a lot of people recently ask me how to sort of format their small and large group sexual magic practices. And this isn't including sex, this is just the sexual energy practice. So I'm going to roll some of that out tonight. I'm also going to roll out some traditionalists, such as the LRP methodology for those of you who are more in a traditional role. So if there's anything that I talk about tonight where you're like, what is she talking about? You can go ahead to our YouTube and view our previous sacred sexuality videos. I did post all of those on our YouTube, Grave Intentions Goods. So everything is there from working with your golden shadow and the prereq exercises to the bioanatomy and physics entanglement aspects of sexual magic practice, to the sacred symbols, numbers, the priestess work aspects, and even the Buddhist red and black Tara, mala, and mantra practices, which we actually are expanding upon a little bit tonight with the shamanistic approach. So all of that is on our YouTube if you need to review that. You shouldn't need to. I'm going to try to review everything very thoroughly tonight, even though it's kind of like a history lesson slash real world application session that we're doing tonight. I'm also going to review some of the Buddhist entanglements. Last month, when I was reviewing the Buddhist sacred sexuality practices, I really didn't go down the shamanistic road. So I'm going to go down that tonight. So, yeah, get ready. We're going to strap ourselves in here. I really like doing these recordings versus the lives because it's a lot of information. You can pause it, rewind it. You can Google things as we go if you need to. And so I am really enjoying this. I would love your feedback, though. Definitely, if you're enjoying this better than the lives, let me know. If you have a preference for the lives, I'd like to know that as well. For those of you who do love our lives, I do want to remind you that this Friday is our Dream Work Live. So that will be a live session. I believe it's at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time that we'll post on our Patreon. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that on our Patreon, I did post a handout explaining the LRP ritual in more detail for you because in the presentation tonight, I am going to review it, but I'm going to review it at a quicker pace than I normally would just because there's a lot of information I want to get out to you. So I did post that on Patreon for free download, as well as the Hero's Journey Tarot Associations, because I kind of go through that a little bit quicker tonight too in the PowerPoint. So I wanted you to have those documents, those supplemental documents, as part of tonight's session. So let's jump into it. So let me share my screen here. You know, that's usually the hardest part for me, right? I'm not very techy. Here we go. Our sacred sexuality series. I think this, besides the dream tending, is my favorite series. Not that I don't love doing the monthly kind of one-offs. I love those as well, but there's so much to dive into in sacred sexual practices that I just feel like I could do this for years and never go over the same topic twice. All right, so as I said, tonight I am going to review three areas in sacred sexuality. I am going to review shamanistic practice, ritual psychology, and the LRP for my traditionalists that I work with. Starting with the shamanistic practice. I just love this photo. I'm getting better at PowerPoint, you guys. I'm really starting to enjoy it, and I am not a techie person, so that's saying a lot. All right, so shamanism. Pretty much all of us have heard of shamanism. I am going to be reviewing very specific shamanistic practices and cultures tonight, ones that are connected to sacred sexual magic. So that is Tungusic. And sometimes some of these words I'm going to spit at you tonight, the pronunciation is very difficult, but the spelling is accurate. So if you need to Google it, just bank on the spelling. So Tungusic means to know. Now, in Tungusic shamanism, male shamans are called samans, and female shamans are called udagans, utakans, and aitugens. So try to say that three times fast. Something very interesting to know as well is originally women were the only ones allowed to be shamans in their tribes. So, and I don't think a lot of people know that. They usually think of shamans as masculine men, but in ancient practices, it was always women. Now, shamans are chosen by spirit when they are born. There usually is a pre existing relationship. So typically it is lineage based, but not always. When you are born, say your father, grandfather, mother, grandmother was a shaman, typically you have been chosen to continue that lineage. So you are born into it. Now, there are plenty of shamans who have developed shamanistic practices that weren't technically born into it, and that is just as applicable. Shamanism is open to everyone, but in the Tungusic tribes, you are born into it. Shaman means frenzy, burning, or fire. So it is sacred fire, sacred burning, sacred frenzy. Shamans create controlled and repeatable trance states. They are responsible for what's called spirit flight and transpossession, which I will talk about in tonight's presentation. Shamans give blessings. They conduct magic or magic spells, especially for hunting when you're looking at ancient shamanism, because that was such a big part of that culture was hunting. Protection works, divination. It usually has a different flavor depending on the tribe or the culture. It usually has a form of ancestral practice. So it's going to vary from tribe to tribe a little bit. So understand that, of course. Now, the Tungusic that I'm reviewing tonight is from North Asia. So that is above where the Great Wall was. And these were indigent groups and tribes that were very nomadic. So they traveled through Mongolia, Manchurian, Northeast China, Russia, and Siberia. So a lot of what I'm going to be presenting tonight in terms of shamanism and the practices and tools that you can incorporate in your personal practice or in your group practices do hail from these areas. When we're looking at ethnicity, it's very Mongolic, Turkic, again, Tungusic, and the Sami people of Hungary also are kind of related to this. They're like distant cousins to these tribes. Now, I will tell you that many years ago, when communism reared its head, there was a huge, what we call shamanic death that took place by communism. At that time, a lot of shamans or shaman tribes, as a whole, these tribes that were nomadic converted to either Islam or Buddhism during that time. So you will see a hodgepodge of shamanism now that represents that merging, that conversion. We also have to look at the fact that a lot of these older lineages have died off. And so a lot of what we have to work from is historical documentation like journals, tablets, things of that nature. I also want to mention that, believe it or not, some of these groups actually created rituals and begged spirits to leave them and never come back. They wanted to be free of that tie to shamanic practice. And so a good example of that is the Origin tribe. They went fully extinct in 2012. And part of the reason for that is one of these rituals where they begged their spirits to leave and never come back. Because shamanism, it is a heavy energy to carry. And we'll talk about that tonight as well. So, in the cosmology in shamanism, regardless of what, let me try to get this out of the way, you guys. Oh my goodness. It doesn't want to leave. Oh, there we go. It's gone. Okay, so the cosmology of shamanism is going to be pretty similar regardless of where you're looking at, where it originated in the world or what tribe you're looking at, there is the belief in the upper world, middle world, and lower world. Now, the upper world is a world of spirit. It is the external blue sky. They believe in 99 plus 3 realms. It is where the Lord of Heavens reside. In the middle world, where we are, physical beings and land spirits, it is the sunny world. It is Earth Mother world energy, middle world energy. And then you have the lower or underworld. Again, these are spirits. These are more hostile spirits. Let me see if I can move this out of the way so you guys can see it. It is the realm of the dead. It's kind of taboo. Only specific shamans can work in the lower underrealm. It is also considered the river realm or the demonic and predatory realm. Now, shamans are not all created equal. They have different specialties. So it wasn't just that you were a shaman, but you were a shaman of X, Y, and Z. And so I wanted to kind of break that down for you. I think it's important if you're going to incorporate practices that you have some historical construct to work with. So there were the Tuvan shaman. These were the throat singers. So today, if you look at, say, Asatru or any sort of Viking culture, Odinism, Tuvan is very much a thing, that throat singing. So that actually, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years ago started with shamanistic practice called Tuvan. Then there's the Dukkha. These shaman were reindeer herders. Herding reindeer was very, very important back then. They also were the shamans that did curses and hypnosis. Then there is the Sakha or Yakut. Now, these were the spiritual blacksmithing shaman. These shaman were very specific to making what are called spirit belts that were used to induce trances. And when I go over shamanic tools tonight, that is something I'll cover a little bit in more detail because I find them fascinating. Um, Now, shamans, like I said, they don't have much agency over their lives. They're born into this or they take it on themselves to live this shamanistic life, and they devote their life, their energy to spirit, to healing, to community. So, what I was saying in the earlier screen is that, shamanism has been glamorized, but there is a lot of self-sacrifice involved in walking that path, which is another reason why over the last couple of hundred years, we've seen a decline in those numbers of authentic shamanistic practitioners. Now, shamans are also broken up into three additional groups: black, white, and yellow. Black shaman were very political. They were the ancient warriors and they worked with high risk spirits. So when you think of black shamans, think of working with risk, like doing cleansings. And the reason cleansing is considered risky is because you can always pick something up, right? You can pick up an attachment when you're doing cleansings. Then you have the white shaman. So white shaman, very peace oriented, very gentle. They only did risk free work. They were very community based. So a lot of their work could have been weather work or, again, like reindeer herding, blacksmithing for the other shamans and the tribe that were, responsible for that. The interesting thing with white shamans is that during the day, they were forced to be Buddhist monks. And so at night, they went from Buddhist monks during the day to white shamans only at night after the sun went down. And then you have your yellow shamans. These were your Tibetan Buddhists. This is where you see that hodgepodge after communism came in and there were conversions. So these were Tibetan Buddhists that were also yellow shamans at the same time. And then it breaks down into another subcategory: wild or domestic. So your wild shamans were trance workers. They were on the trance possession side of shamanism, whereas domestic shamans were the priestly side. These were your political, almost like go-between community, family member type shamans. So just kind of an interesting background into these subgroups in shamanism, because people say, oh, he or she's a shaman, but there's so much more to it than that. There's like these subgroups of specialty. Next, I wanted to talk about the theory of souls in shamanism because this is very important if this is something that you're interested in incorporating into your sacred sexuality practice. First of all, in almost all shaman tribes or shamanistic practices, there is a belief that we all have at least three souls. Now, they go by different names. Really, it's either the Siberian Buryat model or the Darkhad model. So these are Mongol models of souls. And when we look at the Siberian model, the three souls are the Suid, the Ami, and the Suns. The Suid is located at the crown of the head. It is necessary for our body to live. It only has one lifetime and it is individualized to you, the person. The Ami is the breath of life. It comes to you in bird animism. It is like a bird residing in your soul, part of your soul with its own soul construct. It is reincarnated through the bloodline. So this bird animism has lived many, many lives and many, many of your ancestors. And after your physical body dies, this Ami returns to the upper world after death. Then there is the Sums. So the third soul. This is where all of your past lives and all of those experiences sort of reside. It shapes your personality. Now, after you die, your physical body dies, your Suns returns to the underworld via these special waterways, which they actually are guided by water animals. And we'll get into a little bit of that later because it is very interesting. Now, if you look at the Darkhad model, that Mongol model of the three souls is consciousness, bone, and flesh. So consciousness is your vitality, just like the Suid. However, in the Darkhad model, they believe consciousness can be enshrined in objects or things that we call spirit houses. So that is like possession, you're right, or that is entrapment, spirit traps. The second soul is called bone. This soul is on earth the longest, and it is part of the upper realm or what they call the father realm. I will tell you that the belief here in the Darkhad Mongol shamanistic practice model is that if you break bones or damage your bones while you are alive, it actually damages this soul. And it can create a situation where it ends up in the underworld. So, breaking bones was a big deal with a lot of these older shamanistic practices because that was looked at as soul misfortune or soul loss. And then the third soul is flesh. This is your physical form. It leaves the earth the soonest after death. It goes to the lower world, or it is considered part of the mother world of the lower underworld. And again, that's your basic flesh. Now, in shamanism, you're going to find that most individuals have a choice. Not all, and I'll get into that, but most individuals upon death have a choice to stay in spirit or to reincarnate. Now, when you are born, all three of these souls come together at birth. So your Suid, Ami, or Suns, or your consciousness, bone, and flesh, they all come together at birth. And when you die, they all reincarnate differently at death. So it's very, very interesting. They all go to different places, right? Your Suid just dies off. Your Ami goes to the upper world. The Suns goes to the underworld. Your consciousness, again, it just dies off. Your bone goes to the upper, your flesh to the lower. So it's very interesting. If I had more time, I would do a deeper dive on this because the history behind this is very fascinating, but I just wanted to kind of give you a general overview of the historical attachments here to shamanism so that you understand it if it's something that you're going to incorporate. So next, I wanted to just briefly talk about the spirits in shamanism. Now, even though we are focusing on Tun Gusik, because that is where our sacred sexuality practices sort of originate from, a lot of different shamanistic tribes in Serbia, Russia, Hungary, Northeast China, Mongolia have these same spirits. They may have different names, which I'll kind of review with you, but they are the same essence, the same spirit. So when we talk about the upper world, we talk about the heaven spirits or the higher powers. So there is the sky god or the father, right? Goes by many names: Tengri Olgin, Tenger Etseg, Abkahan, or Endari. There is the sky woman or grandmother, Abkahihi or Enakan Buga. These names, I'm telling you, the spelling is accurate, but the pronunciation is difficult. Then you have what are called the Dolan Abgan. These are the seven grandfathers, probably the most fascinating aspect of the heaven spirits. These seven grandfathers are when you look into the sky, it's a tie into astrology. It is the Ursa Major. Okay, they are considered sky deity. So when you look at the Big Dipper, it is called the seven grandfathers in shamanism. It is also referred to as the seven star sisters. They are considered ancestral master spirits responsible for all fate. And if you ever really wanted to deep dive into astrology and astronomy, which I always recommend because there are these crossovers, they all interconnect. I'm omnistic, I believe it all connects. But this Big Dipper, actually, its rotation is in the form of a swastika around North Star. I don't think a lot of people know that, but Google it, it's true. Then in the higher power realm, the upper world, we have Tengur. And Tengur, this is a spirit that resides in the heavens or upper worlds. It cannot be controlled, but it can be called to assist us in need. There are the other shamanic spirits. These are individuals that were chosen to be shamans. They are, now in spirit, and they are choosing the new shamans. They are also consistent with land spirits and other entities that could be tied to a bloodline. So when we're looking at higher powers, it's not always, gods or deceased shaman. It could be land spirits or other entities that are really attached to certain bloodlines that are shamanic in nature. And then you have general ancestral spirits. These are non-shamanics that sort of hang out and watch over a specific person or a specific family, and they also can be prayed to for assistance. Now, let's look at middle world spirits. So, in our middle world, we have Atujan Gazar Ich Banamohihi. These are the Earth Mother Goddess, which is the master of the middle world. And then you have the Goddess of Life, referred to as Yume. She is in charge of fertility, virginity. She's the caretaker of the world tree, and she oversees Galamat Ij, who is the goddess of fire, also the daughter of Tengur, who resides in the heaven or upper realm. Now, Amosi Mama also is here. She is the goddess of birth and life. There's a lot of debate if Amosi Mama is also Yume. I'm putting her here as a separate entity because there's been enough historical documentation to kind of justify that clarification. But depending on what you're reading, there may be a crossover there of Yume and Amasi Mama. Then in the middle world, we have Lus or Nagas. These are those water spirits I was talking about earlier. They're also known to remove danger and bad fortune. They give us direct access to the lower world through water sources, waterways. Water sources have always been very sacred. And individuals, whoever, back in the day especially, that were polluting or desecrating waters would offend the Lus, and the Lus would curse them. They would make a lot of misfortune in anyone's life that kind of desecrated or polluted a water source. Then you have Savdag. These are the spirits of mountains, forests, rocks, and trees. Now, these are once the souls of humans, and they have reincarnated into Earth, sometimes referred to as Buryat, which is a middle world soul that used to be human and now is an integral part of the natural or nature-based world. And then you have Amatan. Amatan are animal spirits. They are representative usually of shamanic spirits. It could be Lus Savdag in disguise. These are gods of animals, and they are also individual animal souls that have died on Earth. Their physical bodies have died. Now, with Amatan, it's very important to respect these spirits, especially if you're hunting. Again, back in the day, hunting was very important. That's how they survived. If you didn't show respect, they would be offended and leave, and then you would have like cursed hunting grounds. So lots of fascinating history in shamanism with Amatan. Now, the one other thing I want to point out before we move on is to access the divine in shamanism. Yes, you do ancestor work, but you also have to have a good relationship with land spirits first. Land spirits are the bridge to the divine, they are the facilitators. And if you don't have a good relationship with land spirits, they will block your access to the divine. So, something very important to keep in mind if you are going to incorporate shamanistic practices. Land spirits, Google it, learn about it. Now, there are other gods and spirits. There is Erlik Khan or Uman Khan, which is the lord of the underworld, also the caretaker of Soons. And if you remember, Soons is our third soul. It's connected to our past life experiences. There is Damdin Dorlig. That is the blacksmith god. If you remember earlier, we talked that some shamans specifically were spiritual blacksmith shaman. So he overseen those shaman. Um, Among the Yucats, he was also known as Kudai Baksi. Again, lots of different names for the same entity. Then you have Sagan Afghan, which is called, his nickname is the Old White Man. So this was a Mongolian Buddhist deity. He would walk along with this huge dragon staff. He had a long white beard and eyelashes. Very similar, if you have ever done any research into Japanese supernatural beliefs, he is very similar to um, some of their supernatural ghosts that they leave offerings for during their different ghost festivals. But in shamanism, he is known as Tsagan Abgan or the Old White Man. He is a Mongolian Buddhist deity. Then we have Chakbor. Let me move this little box again. Sorry, you guys. Chakgor are stuck spirits. These are ghosts. They are unable to leave the physical world. Now, that is by choice sometimes. They choose not to leave. Maybe they have some unfinished business, or maybe they're just lost. That happens a lot. Those are transient spirits. Now, if a Chakgor is in your environment too long, it can cause illness or, that haunting effect, having hauntings. So there were shamans who specifically worked with, again, remember the black shamans, there was black, white, and yellow. So the black shamans dealt with high risk cleansings, high risk spirits, and they would be the ones that would deal with chakbors. Then you have the five spirits known as Galakai. These are deities very similar to Yume, the middle world goddess I had talked about. But these are lords of fire. And this is very important. And I'll dive a little bit more deeply into this tonight because every home has a fire spirit. And that fire spirit blesses the inhabitants. It protects the home. It protects the inhabitants. And even if you don't have a fireplace, you have a fire spirit. And so I'm going to talk about that tonight because there are hearth rituals in shamanism for these fire spirits that are very powerful. Then there is Burhan. Burhan is like a strong primordial nature spirit. It could be of any world, upper, middle, lower. It's also a term used kind of like a generic term in shamanism to describe gods or spirits that are from other religions, like Buddhism, Hinduism, all these different religions. They will refer to them as Burhan. So that can be very confusing depending on the shaman that you're talking to. I gotta take a drink, you guys. I'm doing a lot of talking. All right. Then I want to talk to you about these two very important aspects of shamanism. First is wind horse, called Himari. This is your personal psychic power. This is what allows shamans and other powerfuls, which is us, okay, these are, witches or practitioners, to accomplish things, to cast spells that are successful. Wind horse or Himari is a spirit that resides in the chest. Now, it's going to vary in strength from person to person. It's really based on how you use and accumulate Himari. So if you're somebody who is using it for harm, if you're, cursing people all day long, you are going to weaken your Himari. Now, it can be increased through offerings, through prayer, through veneration of ancestors and spirits, through the use of incense and smoke. And so if you are somebody who does more baneful work, you're going to make sure that you're doing that pretty regularly, because otherwise soul loss will occur, and that's never good. Now, the other thing with Hamari is you need to work it like a muscle. Spirit practice is like a muscle. You have to work it, and especially this particular wind horse spirit, you need to work it. If you don't work it, soul loss can occur again, because it's being neglected. Then there is the hearth fire. We were talking just in the last slide about fire spirit. Again, the Galahaki. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'll be honest, you guys. I believe it's Galakai. Galakai. Sorry, my apologies. Um, this is the conscious spirit and energy of fire and life. It is spirit that connects humans and communities. So, in shamanism, there are a lot of rituals centered around the hearth fire, and that is to strengthen this energy, to strengthen this spirit. Each home has a fire spirit. This spirit is bloodline aspected. So that means it is a spirit that has worked with your ancestors probably for millennia. This spirit knows you. It is there to prevent issues in your home, to bless those in the home, and to keep your spiritual hygiene good. So, what do I mean by that? Intuition. Have you ever been sitting at home and you just get a feeling or something pops in your head? That usually is attributed in shamanism to your fire spirit there in your home. It's trying to communicate with you to make sure that your spiritual hygiene is good. If this spirit becomes weak, you become vulnerable. Well, not just you, anybody and everybody living in the same home as you. You become vulnerable to the outside or external factors, what I like to call sourcing, right? The manipulations and energies of other people, situations, environments that can affect you negatively or attach low frequency to you. It also creates a lack of harmony in the home. It creates that through a lot of miscommunication, a lot of dysfunction. So that is a spirit in shamanism that you're always doing work with to make sure that it is a strong, healthy connection. All right, so tools. Did I skip a page? No, I didn't. Sorry, guys. All right, so let's talk about tools. This is very important because if you are going to incorporate any of this into your practice, you are going to want to acquire some of these tools. So the first thing I want to talk about is a drum. Let me show you my drum. Here, let's see if I can make my page big for a minute. I don't really know how to do that, but let's see if I can do it. Here I am. So this is my spirit drum. I have a nice little, I like ravens. Here's the back of it. There is a little bit of a differential depending on where I'm working with my drum, but that is a drum, obviously. Oh, wait a minute, you guys. I totally took the share option away. I apologize. Let's see. Oh no, how do I make myself small again? Hang on, I can do this. Here we go. Oh no. Oh my gosh, and I'm in the middle of a recording and I screwed it up. Hang on. Let me try to fix this real quick, you guys. Here we go. I fixed it. Yay. Okay, great. All right, so shamanic tools, the drum. It is an enlivened instrument, right? It is enlivened spiritually. It is used to induce trance states, usually in heavier ceremonies where the shaman in charge is in full armor. Sometimes you will see these drums with small bells attached, jingle cones, jingle rings. Back in the day, the handle was actually also a bow and arrow. So it served as a weapon and a shield at the same time. Next, we have the jaw harp. I do not have one of those to show you, but this is another enlivened instrument that shamans will use. Again, it's to create a trance, but it can be used in any type of ceremony. It doesn't have to be a heavier ceremony, and the shaman running it does not need to be in armor. So the other thing with the jaw harp too is usually it is attached to what's called a manjig bundle. And so a manjig bundle is basically these cotton and wool snakes or ribbons that have jingle cones on them. Next, we have the mirror tali. So this is an enlivened chest mirror. This is basically a shaman Swiss Army knife. Okay, it's usually in brass, bronze, or copper. I am wearing mine tonight. Um, it is in brass, bronze, or copper. It protects the shaman. It's used for divination and scrying. It can hold and transfer energy. In the Darkhad Mongols belief system, their practice system, this is usually attached also to a manjig bundle, like we just described with the jaw harp. Um, it can be a spirit house if you are doing a spirit trap, like if you're doing a cleansing and you're trapping a lost transient spirit so you can release it somewhere. It can be a spiritual battery to store energy. It can be used to extract pollution. And what I mean when I say extract pollution is that is the shamanistic term for exorcisms. So when you are reading anything that is involving shamanistic practice, when they talk about pollution extraction, that is exorcising a person, a place, or an object. Okay. So I'll show you my oh my goodness. Hang on. I don't want to do this. Let's see if I can. Okay, well, I guess in the end, I will, I will show you my tally. I'm going to screw this up so bad. I don't want to like screw up the whole presentation. All right, so moving on. When we were talking earlier about the black, white, and yellow shaman, I did want to point out with shamanic tools, the black shaman, so those were like the warrior, high risk dealing shaman, they use drums. Whereas the white shaman, again, those were kind of the peaceful, community based shaman. They typically used bells and staff, and these were their methods of inducing a trance state. Now, let's talk about armor. In shamanism, armor is important. The belief is that your back is vulnerable to spirit attack during ritual. And so, a lot of times, shaman will wear mirrors on their back. So, if you see old photos or videos of shamanistic ceremonies and you see kind of like they have a vest with mirrors dangling off of it, that is why. The other thing that you'll also see in these older ceremonies, and they still use them today, but back in the day they were much more prevalent, is on their attire they would have a lot of ribbons and ropes dangling. And that was for the land spirits. That was to help facilitate land spirits to enter them during ritual. Again, remember, land spirits are the bridge and facilitators to the divine. So you had to incorporate those land spirits into ritual. Feathers. So you'll notice they have a lot of feathers in their head pieces or their shoulder pieces. This is for spirit flight. I know I mentioned that right at the very beginning. Spirit flight is what allows their spirit to fly once they are in a trance state. So those feathers are very sacred. Again, they're enlivened. They are part of that spirit flight aspect. The other thing I want you to remember in shamanism is that all objects have spirit. The belief is that everything is a spirit object. It doesn't matter what it is. Um, Anything that exists can have a spiritual energy attachment or what have you to it. So keep that in mind whenever you're dealing with anything, really. All right, offerings. So, one of the big things in shamanism, like in any other practice, it doesn't matter what spiritual practice you're in, is offerings, right? So, in shamanism, the most popular offerings are liquid, smoke, and food, very similar to other practices. I will tell you some caveats here with land spirits, they are tricky. Do not ever give them an offering of alcohol. No alcohol. Land spirits sort of have trauma with alcohol. If you're going to use smoke, use juniper. You do not want to use a cleansing smoke, really. Juniper is really the shaman's choice when it comes to spirit offering or ancestral offering. Liquids, milk is the number one. Otherwise, vodka, tea, or water. And if you're going to do a liquid offering, make sure you're leaving it in all four directions, that it's being offered in all four directions. Again, like I said, juniper is the number one smoke. Otherwise, sandalwood, sage, and thyme are okay. If you're going to do food, the food should be white in nature. So, what does that mean? That's grains, breads, or cooked meat and fish. If you're doing a longer or very specific ceremony, I would definitely do cooked food. And part of that is because, unlike in a lot of other practices where you do an offering and then you allow it to sit on your altar or with that deital statue for so many hours or days before you dispose of it, you're not supposed to consume it, right? Because that's theirs. In shamanism, you consume it. So after you've used these items in ritual or ceremony, it is passed around to all participants and attendees and it is consumed. Um, Other things I wanted to kind of point out with shamanism before I move on to our next topic is if you are a shaman, this is your last lifetime on earth, your last incarnation. Remember earlier when I said the belief is that when you die, you have the choice to stay in spirit or reincarnate, but there are exceptions. This is the exception. If you are a shaman, it is your last lifetime. You have to reincarnate as a shaman ancestor spirit to keep the process going. Um, One of the practices in shamanism is Turkic letters, learning the old Turkic pantheons, the gods and goddesses, which I kind of rolled out to you here tonight. They also have their own set of ruins, very similar to Asatru ruins, Odin ruins, Odinism practice, but it uses Turkic letters. So that is something, if you were going to walk the path of shamanism, you would want to familiarize yourself with Turkic pantheons and the old Turkic ruins. Excuse me one second. Last but not least, here I want to talk about merits. Merits is a very Buddha term. It means general good karma. It is your karma balance sheet, your merit sheet. And in shamanism, if you give service to others, the world owes you. And it's okay to be selfish. So that's very different from other practices, right? You're supposed to be selfless. In shamanism, part of giving service is to earn your karmic brownie points intentionally. It's very intentional. And it's okay to be this way. That is part of the belief system. They believe in no debt states, no karmic debt. And to avoid having any karmic debt, you do need to give that service to earn your brownie points. So it's called merits. So if you're studying shamanism and somebody's talking about merits, that's what they're talking about. It's about doing something for those karmic brownie points to even out your balance sheet. Again, very different than other practices where it's supposed to be selfless or it doesn't count. Serbian shamanism, very similar to what I've already reviewed. I did a separate PowerPoint slide on this just because there were slight variations I wanted to point out. I have a lot of Serbian friends, so I wanted to make sure I did this so that I didn't get emails from them. In Serbian shamanistic practices, the shaman is blindfolded during ceremony. And that's so that they don't make any eye contact with people. And the reason for that is that the ancestor or spirit attached to them during that ceremony could jump. And what jump means is attached to the person that they make eye contact with. Now, in Serbian shamanism, there's a lot more in terms of dream visitation with ancestors. They use cartomancy, which you know is one of my favorite forms of divination. They also use tali necklaces, which again, I have mine on. It's that brass copper, almost mirror-like necklace for protection. It's also a spiritual battery. They use drums, sacred drums, and all of these items have their own personas, their own energy and spirit. But in Serbian shamanism, they actually give these item names. So each one of these sacred items will have a very specific name, and sometimes that name is secret. Only the shaman will know the name of that item. Now, also in Serbian shamanism, nobody should be touching these items except the shaman that owns them, because that drum, this tali, it protects you. Okay. It doesn't know how to react to different people or third parties. It's kind of like, the best way I could describe it is like going to somebody's house that you've never met before and going to pet their random dog. That dog doesn't know you. You don't know how that dog's going to react to you. The dog could bite you, it could lick you. You don't know. Same thing with spirit, same thing with ancestors. So, excuse me. You should, in Serbian shamanism, you do not touch somebody's tali, their drum, anything sacred that they're using in service. Now, as far as theology, same theology with the upper world, middle world, underworld. It's the same. In the drumming aspect of Serbian shamanism, they use what's called quickening for their trance states. And I'm not going to screw around with trying to make my screen big again, but quickening, you would have the back of your drum here. So you get the gist of it. Quickening is that is how they create trance states. It's a drum quickening. They usually walk in a circle around the participants who are either kneeling or sitting, and they will do a quickening drum circle to get them into that trance state. The other thing with Serbian shamanism is most of their rituals are going to be outside at night. There should be no light during the ceremony at all except a ceremonial fire or candles. That is kind of like just a given. Same thing in Romani and Gypsy shamanism. There's a little bit of a crossover there. They had two types of throat singing. Remember, we talked about shaman who were specific to throat singing. Um, they have throat singing, which is that trance work, vibrational singing, but they also have what's called middle singing. That's also vibrational, but it is for meditation work and not trance work. So those are the two deviations in Serbian shamanism. And as far as offerings go, milk, bread, food for specific ancestors, the number one thing, apples. In Serbian shamanism, you're always going to leave an apple. It's just kind of one of their things. The associations to apples to the gods is very important to them. All right. Now, moving on into ritual psychology. Let me wet my whistle again here, folks. I told you tonight was going to be a doozy. All right, so ritual psychology. I guess I should have titled this like ritual format, but so much of this starts in the mind, right? And it's planning. And that's why I called it psychology, because many of you who are sitting in on these courses, you're leaders, right? And whether you're a solo that's branching into maybe small groups, maybe there's just two or three of you, or you're branching into larger groups, there's 7, 9, 50, 100 of you. It is important to plan and have the right mindset with ritual. And so, what I'm going to do in this part of the presentation is kind of break down how you can do that. I'm going to give you some format ideas here. All right, so play, work, worship, right? This is I guess it's kind of like a coven slogan. You can call it whatever you want. Your spirit group, your spirit team, your practicing group, your practicing team, your coven, whatever you want to call it. It's play, work, worship in all of these scenarios. Now, whenever you enter a ritual or ceremony, you're entering with three personas: your present self, your higher self, and your younger self. Always remember that. Whatever the ritual or ceremony is, it's going to involve spiraling in and then spiraling out. And so I kind of want to break down what that is, because if you don't have a good idea or how to plan for that, you get what's called the circle scramble, right? The circle scramble is if participants aren't grounded properly, you can't really spiral in or out properly. It becomes kind of like this scrambled, messy, kind of incohesive ritual. So, the first thing I always recommend is a ritual bath before any ritual. Use candles, incense, oils, but most importantly, use something that's going to be in that ritual. So, for me, if I'm using my tali, I might bathe with this tali. If there's another item I'll be using, say I'm using a sacred stone or a sacred willow bark staff, I may bathe with that item. Also, eat small and light prior to ritual. And kind of as an offshoot here, if you are a Hindu practitioner or a yogini practitioner, so you're probably more Buddhist, you don't ever want to eat meat before a ritual because that blocks, it creates blockages in your spiritual connections. So just kind of an interesting offshoot there that, if you're working with Hindu gods, Buddhist gods, deity, from a yogini or a Hinduistic standpoint, avoid meat like for 24 hours before a ritual. Now, I think robing and dressing is important for ritual, even if it's by yourself. I like naked ritual, but if I'm with other people, I'm probably not going to be naked. But there are specific things that I like to wear, specific jewels. Like I have a priestess necklace I'll wear. And I encourage that for you as well. Have a specific outfit, robe, or piece of jewelry that you only wear for rituals, and even break it down where it's specific rituals. You can have like three different necklaces, one is each different type of ritual that you do. Fun fact too, as I get into ritual, there's going to be some crossover with traditional rites of witchcraft. Again, if you go to our YouTube, Grave Intentions Goods, I did post the video there on our YouTube for free. You can learn about the compass round, the household. These are kind of crossovers to what I'm teaching tonight. And so that video is on there if you need to review that. Now, moving forward, typically when you're spiraling in or starting a ritual, you are going to cast a circle with the elements and you're going to go 3 times around, whether that's you by yourself or your whole group. 3, remember, is a very special number. I talked about that in our third, I think it was our second or third, it was our third sacred sexuality presentation. 3 is a power number. It's magic. So again, go back and look at that sacred sexuality video and read about what does 3 mean? Why do we use 3? And again, some examples I put were hear, see, speak, sword, water, incense, typical things you find in a ritual. 3 is power, and always do everything in ritual, usually in 3. So, why are you casting a circle? You want to establish a sacred space so you can let your guards down, right? You also want to make sure that once you establish the space, you are protected from interruptions. So, no phones. Everybody's phone should be turned off and put in a phone basket. One of the first things, and again, this goes back to traditional rites of witchcraft, is ablutions, right? Everyone gets blessed. It's your outer core, outer care. You can use water, you can use oil, you can touch different parts of the body. If you have a lot of people, have people partner up and do each other. But don't rush through this part. Everyone should be receiving ablution before you start the ritual. Of course, one of the fundamental parts of spiraling in is inviting in and commanding in, whether it's specific deity, the guardians of the watchtowers, the elements. This is embodiment, right? As you're calling in different deity, these are the approving parents, right? And that comes from Hellenism, if you're working with Hellenistic deity especially. You want the approving parents, you want to embody them. So you do have to call them in, invite them in, command them in as part of the spiraling in process. Now, I will tell you this. You do need to develop relationships with these deity, okay? You can't be that kid that's just calling when they need money or something, right? Or you're just talking to them when you're doing a ritual. You do need to have a relationship, because if you're not developing a relationship and you're just calling them in whenever you're doing a ritual, they're probably going to tell you to get bent, right? They're not going to give a shit what you're doing. So make sure you make that part of your practice. Whoops. Okay, so again, the mind has to be in ritual. That's where transformation happens. You always have to be mindful. The mind is the most powerful spell casting tool you have. Positive mindset can open doors that you can't even believe were capable of being opened. Negative mindset can close doors faster than a fart in the wind. Okay, so your mind is powerful. It's where the transformation, the energetic change first starts. It's part of the reason why in my practice, if I'm doing work for somebody, I am sending them photos and videos. Why? They need to see it. That transformation happens when their eyes see that cast. It sparks something in there, right? Seeing is believing, and I feel it's important. It's a very important part of activating a spell is involving the mind. Whatever you start, you need to finish. I don't care how wrong your ritual or ceremony goes. I don't care what happens. You pick yourself up and you finish it. Okay. The apex of your ceremony or your apex of your circle is going to be right at the point of the great rite or the high magic. Once you hit that apex, you're going to start spiraling out. Now, when you're spiraling out, there are certain things you're going to want to do. One of the most important things, and I talked about this in the traditional rites of witchcraft, it's very similar to the red meal or the housel, is cakes and wine, right? That's cakes and wine after you spiral out and close the ceremony is great for grounding. You're letting go of that energy. You get to communicate with other members. So there's bonding, especially in small groups, large groups. You want that bonding. I will tell you, if you're working with a group, keep things positive, be complimentary. If mistakes were made, you don't need to go around correcting people. Corrections can wait until later. Use this time as you spiral out just to be a positive time. You're always going to want to thank the deities that you called in. You want to thank, the universe for the blessings. You want to thank, whatever elementals and watchtowers you're using, but you also want to command them to leave. You do need to remember that because that's something sometimes people skip. And also remember the power of three. So when you're closing your circle, again, 3 times around, and it is very important that you're doing things the same way each time. You want consistency. And again, I'm giving you this as applications to some of the shamanistic practices you could be using. This kind of incorporates it more into like a group setting versus a solo setting. So I wanted you to have tools for that. Now, if you're in a large group, it is important that everyone is on the same page. You need to explain things, explanations. Some people are going to be tradition bound. They are going to be oath bound. It's important that you differentiate what your group is going to be. Are you going to be tradition bound? Are you going to have oaths? You better get that squared away before you start running large group rituals. If you are leading, which if you're watching this video, you're a leader, you need to project with your diaphragm. You need to be loud enough so that everyone there can hear you. You want to meter and pace, slow, steady enunciations, right? Use easy terminology. But, more important than anything, you've got to explain what's happening and what's being done. People need to understand. You want their participation. You want everyone to be engaged in the ritual. You don't want anybody just standing there. If you have a real large group, you can break up into smaller groups. You can break up into the 4 corners or 4 separate groups. And here's the nice thing with big rituals. Each group could be doing something different. It's okay to have more than one thing happening at a time in a ritual, even a high ceremony ritual. You can have 4 different things happening. If you're leading it, you need to give directions. And remember, participation is key. Everybody that is part of this ceremony needs to be participating. Even shamans, in shamanism, they will have everybody sit in a circle and they will walk in front of each individual as they're either drumming or with their manjigs. Everybody is involved somehow. All right, so chants. Chants are a great way to involve everybody. I will tell you that you should teach the chant in advance. It should be short, simple, and only 2 to 4 lines. Chants will build energy for you and for your ritual, but it's not going to do that if everybody's trying to remember the words. So keep it simple. If people want to help, let them, delegate, let them set up, clean up, be in charge of food, but don't micromanage, right? Another way to get people involved is what we call calls and responses. So if you've ever been to a ritual where, the leader says, hey, and the group says, hey, hey, that's your call and responses. It's a good way to get people involved. But again, people need to know in advance what their response is to your call. Other things I recommend, let me move this again. When you're starting circles, I always say grounding, 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 right? Do a light meditation with some slow movement, deep breaths, get that going right off the bat. If you are leading, I encourage you to be flexible, be changeable, have backup plans if things do go wrong, and rehearse it. actually walk through it versus just in your mind. Do it physically. Have somebody there to time you. Make sure it will work. Um, couple other little tidbits here. If it's a new moon, that's a great time for personal rituals by each member in your group. If it's a full moon, it's a great time for group rituals. Now, you don't have to go by that. That's just a recommendation from me. But it seems to work better, the individual versus group dynamics. If the ritual is outdoors, assign somebody to handle outside influences. That's people, right? You don't want people walking up on your circle on the beach, right? You don't want to have anything interrupt your ritual. So have somebody in charge of handling that. Especially if it's shamanistic, because there's going to be drums and bells and people are going to hear that and be interested and come wandering over. You don't want looky-loos either. Looksy-loos, is that what they call them, where they're just kind of standing off staring at you? That's weird, right? All right, other things I want to just kind of roll out as the ritual psychology, ritual format. I think it's a good idea to have first degree and second degree titles in your group or coven. What is first degree and second degree titles? These are your coven maidens and your coven knights, young men, young women who are new to practicing. What I usually recommend, they're basically assistants, right? They're that first, second degree title holder. They are assisting with all elements. You're kind of molding them, shaping them, teaching them. I would keep them kind of like on training wheels for 6 to 9 months, right? And before they graduate to a third or higher degree member in your group, you need to have them host a Sabbath. And when I say host a Sabbath, I don't mean just make a potluck. They need to write and submit a ritual, and they need to lead that ritual. And I would have the requirement on your coven maidens and your coven knights that they need to write and submit that Sabbath ritual at least 3 months in advance, so that they have time to do rewrites. And that's because, these young men and women, or even older, some coven maidens and coven knights are in their 40s. I guess I shouldn't use the term young. Well, spiritually young, I guess they are. Um, Here's the thing is like they may participate, but when they have to write their own, sometimes they're going to need a lot of guidance. Again, they have to rehearse. Sometimes what they're thinking in their mind doesn't really translate to reality. So put that 3 month marker in there just so that there's time to work with them to rewrite it so that it is a workable, reasonable ritual with a chant that works, with activities that work. They're going to need that. Believe me, they're going to need the 3 months. Anyway, that's just a suggestion. It doesn't have to be this way. It's just kind of things that I've incorporated and done over the years that I feel like it works really well. And so I'm just kind of sharing that with you. Now, last but not least, I want to talk about the LBRP. This is for my traditionalists that are watching this video. Oh, I hate this little box. Why won't it just go away? I don't understand. Hang on. Hang on, you guys. There we go. All right. What is the LBRP? It is a traditionalist ritual. It encompasses both, all pagan, Masonic, Jewish, and Christian methodology. It is a ritual that can be done alone or with a group. It creates a safe workspace. It's something you can do every day. It doesn't have to be specific to any one thing. It kind of has a general format, so you can use it for a variety of things. It helps you to connect with your spirit allies, the deities that you work with, whether those are angels, goetics, even your higher self. You're able to call them into a safe circle with you. When you do this, you are calling in energy of your destiny. So it is a powerful ritual, right? Varied pantheons. So whether you're a Hellenistic, neo-pagan practitioner, whether you're an Ars Goetic practitioner, you can curtail the LBRP to your pantheon. There is a vibrational component here, just like we were talking about in shamanism and in Buddhism with the sacred words and sacred mantras and the 10 syllables, sacred sound. Same thing here. You're going to find this crossover in all magic. There is Divine names create divine vibration when you say them out loud. That's why you're supposed to say them out loud. And this is kind of just like a little diagram here. All right. And now I did post on Patreon a much more descriptive document with the LBRP ritual. I'm going to go through it in here, but I want you to know that you can download that off the Patreon site as well. Boy, this is the most I think I've talked in like at least a week because my voice is already getting hoarse. Isn't that wild? All right, hang on. All right, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. We're going to just talk about what it's for, where it came from, what magic circles are. We kind of just talked about that. But we're going to break down the stages of it, which is the Kabbalistic cross, the drawing of pentagrams, invoking your spiritual allies, and then returning back to the Kabbalistic cross again. Now, this ritual can be personalized. You can make it your own. So I'm going to give you the formula, but you can make it your own, again, with your own pantheon, with your own needs, goals, all of that. So I don't want you to feel like you just have to use the deities I'm going to be using as examples in today's. What is it for? Okay, this is a daily practice to clean your microcosm and connect with your spiritual allies. It's a generally used cleansing ritual, really, working with a pentagram. It is a container, a safe container for your spiritual work. It is used for spiritual decluttering. So, again, cleansing. It's used as a daily practice to help you build your skill. Again, when we were talking about wind horse in shamanism, it's a muscle. You have to work it. Like with any other muscle, either you use it or you lose it, right? So this helps build that muscle, that strength. Again, connecting with your deities, your spiritual allies. That's so important. When I was talking about ritual psychology, you can't be that teenager just calling up mom like, hey, I need money, and then not conversating with mom for weeks on end. Um, you want a relationship outside of give me, I need. And so this is a good ritual to do to build that relationship. It is created from a very eclectic blend of paganism, Jewish methodology, Christianity, Christian magic. There's a lot of magic in Christianity, and Masonic symbolism. And it's not just Psalms. We talk about the Psalms being spells. There's a lot more than that. In December, I'm doing Banned from the Bible. If you guys aren't in the $5 a month tier or higher, get yourselves in the $5 a month tier because it'll be an awesome presentation. All right, where did it come from? The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, I'm giving you a lot of historical reference here. Just know that this was a ceremonial magic ritual used by the original Order of the Golden Dawn. It became a mainstay in modern occultism. So this is kind of like considered to be a basic preliminary to any other magical working. So it can be a ritual by itself, but it also can be a precursor ritual to divination, to spell casting. It can be used for initiation rituals. There's so much that you can do with this here. I do break down the years like 1889 and 1809 when these manuscripts kind of surfaced, how they surfaced. Feel free to read this at your leisure. It's on here. It's a recording. You can pause this and read it and Google it. I'm not going to go through it, but I wanted you to have the information. There's a long history here. It didn't just come out of thin air, is I guess what I'm saying. Again, it's a safe container for spiritual work. It is protective and immersive, really at the same time. It does have that operant field effect, right? So resonant fields, and I don't know how to pronounce this. I call it Adalon, but I know that's not the right way to pronounce it. So it's really kind of tapping into multiple energetic resources to create what I call safety. It's a safe space to do your work. And it's also very cleansing and balancing at the same time. These are just kind of, a lot of people will look at this and say, oh, Solomon. Yes, Solomon's seals are very similar. Solomon, with his, demonic control seals. I don't use those. When I do use goetic symbols. I use the symbols attached to the goetic. I do not encircle it in Solomon's seal because that's considered enslavement. I don't believe in spiritual enslavement. This is different. I don't want you to confuse the two as Solomon's seals and our safe container of the LRP. This is more of a ritualized, here's where I'm going to be, you're going to be, and this is what we're going to do, versus enslavement. There's a huge difference. And again, I can't really, I'm not going to jump into it too much because we'll be talking about it for at least an hour, but study up on that. It's important to know the difference. If you work with goetics, before I move on, never, never, never work with them in the encompassment of Solomon's seal that is considered enslavement. You never want to enslave a spirit. All right, the hero's journey is ritual expression. Now, this is another JPEG that I did put on our Patreon because as you can see, I cut off the left side here. I apologize for that. Anytime I change something in PowerPoint, like it wants to go through and change everything, and I missed this one before I could fix it. Anyway, this is the hero's journey using the tarot. Going through departure, trials of initiation, cosmogonic, oh my gosh, cosmogenic cycles, returns and reintegrations. Same thing with the LRP, but I'm using the tarot as kind of like a cheat sheet reference to make it more understandable for you. So magic as reenactment of myth. Yes. Most of our magic today are our older spells, our older rituals, our high ceremonies, our high magic is based on reenactments from mythology that we have ascertained through different texts, historical and sacred texts. A spell can be anything. Okay. A ritual, however, is intended to be customized to a specific goal or intent. Now, a ceremony is even different yet because that is intended to stay the same. Okay, so it's important to know the difference here. A spell can be anything, a ritual is custom, a ceremony stays the same, consistency. And it all revolves around reenactments of mythology. Now, the example I'm giving you here is the hero's journey. Okay, so a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. This is where, fabulous forces are there. They're encountered and a decisive victory is won. And the hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. The hero's journey is a beautiful way to describe what a ritual or ceremony or spell is. And that's why I included it. It helps with understanding what it is that we're doing. I have talked to so many people over the years that have read a book and then jumped into rituals and ceremonies and spells and never really understood the mythology. They never really understood the cosmology. And so then they struggle with why things aren't manifesting. It's important to understand these things. If you want to manifest things, you need to have a historical reference point, and that's why I'm including this, just to make your brain think a little bit harder and connect some dots. The ritual flow of the lesser ritual of the pentagram. Again, the hero's journey. We have the departure, which is going to be the Kabbalistic cross. They're calling in the four elements as the ordeal. As we go after we pass the threshold, we go through the challenges and temptations. We go into revelation, the abyss of death and rebirth. This is calling in the archangels or whoever's in your pantheon. I'm using the archangels as an example tonight. We go through transformation into atonement, which is where you're allowing the six-rayed star to shine in as the boon, and then you're returning to the Kabbalistic cross. This is your call to adventure, the hero's journey in the RFP. I'm sorry, LRP. I'm starting to lose my voice. I know that can be very confusing. That's why I'm breaking it down in bite-sized bits for you, and I also put that document for you to download online. This is, again, very traditionalist ritual here. And that's why I'm including it, because I do have very traditional working clients. So the Kabbalistic cross serves as both a departure and return stage. So you start and finish with the cross. Calling the four elements is the ordeal. That is kind of the threshold. calling the four archangels or spiritual allies or pantheons from whatever pantheon or Hellenistic deity from whatever pantheon you work with, Goetic, whatever. That is the initiation and transformation stage. And the sixth rate star is the microcosm flooding into our microcosm. Macrocosm, microcosm as the boom. Sorry. Boy, even I'm tripping over my words. Sorry, guys. All right, what's the Kabbalistic cross? Well, here it is. This is a mindfulness practice that connects us, it grounds us, it balances us. You start and begin this ritual with the Kabbalistic cross. Fun fact, this is actually used in home cleansings or clearings. This is used if a home or property is haunted to clear it. So this is giving you a breakdown of how to do it. You start out by reaching above your head, touching a ball of brilliance, right? You are going to say very specific words. And again, vibration. This is a spell. You have to say it out loud. They mean things. Atah, thou art. Bring the light into the earth. You're going to follow down. You're going to say Malkuth, the kingdom. Bring the light to the left shoulder. Envision a blue ball of love. Now, some of these words are hard. You could use the, not translator, but the pronunciation on Google. Vagudula, the glory. You're going to bring the light to the right shoulder. You're going to visualize a red ball of will, right? And on and on. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of it. This is a breakdown. Sorry, this presentation went longer than I thought it would go. All right, this is a breakdown of exactly how you're going to do your motions, what you're going to visualize, and the word that you're going to say for the vibrational spell. All you got to do is follow this. It's a recipe. You don't need to change it. It's already perfect. Just follow this recipe. And again, this is a recording. It's not a live, so you guys can, pause this, screenshot it, practice it, do whatever you need to do. So that's going to start and end your ritual. This is the banishing earth pentagram. So earth contains all the other elements and it can cleanse all elemental energies. Now, there are other pentagrams that can be used to kind of tune the space, like if you're doing the greater ritual of the pentagram, but I want to focus on very easy, understandable, digestible stuff tonight. So banishing and invoking elemental pentagrams, let me move my photo here, is right here. This is also in the handout that I put on Patreon for you. Very specific. As you can see, you're starting fire, okay, water, air, earth. If you look at the arrows on here, I'm realizing that you're viewing me backwards. As you're looking at this video, I'm doing it backwards because of the nature of being recorded. So look at the diagrams. Invoking is one direction, banishing is the opposite direction. So if you're invoking and calling in, you're going to do the invocation. If you're banishing and pushing out, you're going to do the opposite. So look at this, practice it, YouTube it. I would do it, but I just realized I'm doing it backwards because I'm being videoed. So that kind of sucks. I just realized that. This is a diagram that shows you where to start. So the spirit invoking pentagrams right here, if you're doing active or passive, it's very easy. It sounds complicated. It's not. Invoking is one way, banishing is the reverse. It just requires a little bit of practice. Signs used in this ritual. Damn it. Every time I move, I got to move again. So signs used in the LRP. So there's the sign of silence or Hippocrates. It's the finger to the lips as to shush someone who is too loud. It is protective. Then there is the sign of the Emperor or Horus. It's the left foot forward and hands outstretched as if reaching for something. This is the active sign. So you're going to be using these two signs during the ritual. Very easy to kind of memorize. It's just two signs. Drawing the pentagrams in the circle, very, very easy. Also, now you can literally draw this on your floor, if you're on concrete with chalk, or you can use tape. I know people that use, glow in the dark tape. You can use candles to mark it. You can do whatever you want. You can actually just draw it in the air invisible, as long as you follow, again, the recipe. So let me move my picture once again. My goodness, I'm just moving all over here. Okay, and here's the recipe. And again, I'm just going to go through the first few. You guys can pause this, read it, practice it, YouTube it. But you're going to start out facing east. You're going to draw an earth banishing pentagram. So remember, banishing, if we go back, oh, one more. Here is your invoking, and here is your banishing. So it's banishing. So look at the directions here. Look at the directions of how you're going to be doing that. And again, practice makes perfect, you guys. You know, I know it sounds complicated, but after you practice it a little bit and you start doing it, it'll become second knowledge for you. So you're going to start out facing east. You're going to draw the banishing pentagram. You're going to make the sign of the Emperor. That's Horus. So which was Horus? Do you guys remember? Horus was out, active, hands out, left foot forward. Okay. Make the sign of silence. Okay. Then you're going to face south. You're going to keep your arm outstretched. You're going to turn 90 degrees to the south. You're going to draw another pentagram. You're going to vibrate the Hebrew God name, Adonai, and make the sign of silence. Again, I am using Christian pantheon tonight. You may be using Goetic pantheon or a Hellenistic pantheon or an Odinistic pantheon. This is just the example I'm using. Then you face west. Keep your arm outstretched and turn 90 degrees to the west. You're going to draw another pentagram right there in the air, you guys. Right there in the air. Is it invoking? Is it banishing? Depends on your ritual. You're going to vibrate the Hebrew God name, Aye. Make the sign of silence. And on you're going to go. Facing north, facing east. You get the idea. This is the traditional LRP. So the traditional LRP is going to use God, Tetragrammaton, Adonai, Yahweh, and the archangels, Michael, Uriel, Gabriel. If you're a Goetic practitioner, if you are a Hellenistic practitioner, if you jump on YouTube, you can find the LRP that has been tweaked for those specific pantheons. Calling the archangels in. Okay, so whether it's archangels or goetic, again, follow the formula. It's basically speaking. Okay, it's speaking. Once you've cleared the four directions, you completed that last step, the four elements. What is revealed to you is divinity that was always present. It was always there. Okay, before me, Raphael, behind me, Gabriel, at my right hand, Michael, at my left hand, Uriel. Okay, and so again, there is some repetition here. So Raphael, God has healed. He is to the east, air and mental clarity. He heals injuries. Michael, he's to the south. He's fire and protection. He heals disease. Gabriel, strength of God. To the west, water, empathy, understanding, communication, imagination. And Uriel, the light of God. To the north, grounding, abundance, life force, and nature. So if I cast an LRP circle and I invoke the archangels, and my whole reason for casting the LRP is because my partner and I are fighting and arguing and not understanding each other, which archangel do I want to talk to? Gabriel, right? Strength of God to the west, water, empathy, understanding, communication, imagination. And so I am probably going to have dialogue with Gabrielle directly in this circle, asking for that divine assistance and communication with my partner. So it's just an example. Now, another example is I'm just using Egyptian pantheon. You can do this with any pantheon. It is pretty common for those who work with Egyptian pantheons to use these I think they're called canotopic or canopic jars, and they will put these jars at the four corners, right? Fire, earth, water, air. They have names, so when they're calling them in, they're going to call them in by Hapi, Imsete. They have their symbols here. So this is an example of customizing it. So if you work with an Egyptian pantheon, you're not going to be talking to Yahweh and Saint Michael and Saint Gabriel. Okay, you're going to be talking to Ra most likely, or Osiris. You are going to be calling in Hapi, Imsete, You are going to have their jars maybe at the four corners or representatives of them at the four corners. So again, this is just an example of customization with the LRP. Okay, so um, there is also the astrological attachment. Some people will approach the LRP from a simply an astrological perspective. I'm an astrologist. I have done the LRP from an astrological standpoint. So I did include this diagram. It involves Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, the moon, Mercury, Mars, and the sun versus the sun representing God or Yahweh. Mars is Saint Michael. So you can understand how you swap out and you customize the LRP from an astrological standpoint. Venus is Uriel, Mercury is Gabriel. So that is another way to customize it if, say, you don't work with a pantheon, but you are an astrologer and you work with the energy or the planetary influence of the planets and their Hellenistic representations. So this is just another formula for you to have of customization. Now, just remember, pentagrams are used in all of this. Why? They represent the microcosm, whereas hexagrams represent the macrocosm. It is divine geometry, sacred geometry. That is part of magic as well. It is part of astrology, is a part of everything, the universe. Okay. So once the microcosm is cleared, the spiritual guidance of the macrocosm can flow into the space. Just keep that in mind. Okay. The hero's return. So you're finishing your ritual. You are going to come back and repeat that Kabbalistic cross that I showed you earlier. You have the formula there. Okay. Now, before you step back, what are you going to be doing in this circle? During your ritual, again, like I use the example, I'm having a problem with my boyfriend. I need Gabriel's help with communication. It can be any witchy thing. Maybe you're going to do a tarot reading in there. Maybe you're going to do a sacred meditation. Maybe you want to talk to some ancestors or specific spiritual allies, and you need to invoke a deity to have access to them. In shamanism, it could be a land spirit deity you're invoking in that circle to have access to your ancestor. Maybe you just want to go in there to declare your will for the day, like a daily spell. Like today, I am, not going to have a freak out. Today, I'm going to have energy to do everything on my list. It could be something simple. Again, you're working that muscle, right? You're working that muscle. It doesn't have to be big. Sometimes we cast spells for the simplest things, like I want to sleep at least 6 hours tonight. Okay. So just work that muscle. And it's practice. The more you practice this ritual, the more it becomes second nature, and you're not getting confused drawing pentagrams in the air and turning to the different directions and saying the words. It'll become second nature to you. How can you personalize it? Well, we talked about that a little bit already. Again, invoking the spiral 3 times clockwise to center. That's back in our ritual psychology. We talked about that. If you are going to personalize it, I would suggest doing the 3-time cast walk around, especially if it's just you. But here's a little breakdown here. If you're invoking spirals, these are for empowerment. This is where you're collecting energy and you're directing energy. If you're doing affirmations, use the elements: air, fire, water, earth. Air for a clear mind and clarity, fire to connect to source and making sure that connection is clear. Water is emotions. Maybe you need some balancing. Earth is connection to the world, community, other people, right? You can add in the names of your spiritual allies, right? We talked about that already. So you can so I use the example of the Enochian aces, right? Bitam, Nanta is earth, Bitam is fire. So whatever pantheon you're working with, you can do the assignments there and call them in. So again, it's very personalizable. Personalizable. My goodness. Oh my goodness, is that the end? I am rooting for you. Holy cow. All right, let me have a sip. Hang on. Okay, let me move this out of the way. We are going to hit stop share. Look at that. And here I am. That was a long presentation. I don't even know how long it was. Does it tell me? It doesn't. This is my Tolly. I wanted to show it to you earlier, but I was afraid that I would shut down the presentation. That was a lot of information. That's part of the reason why I'm doing these recordings versus lives. So you can take your time watching this. Um, it was actually a lot more than what I thought it was going to be when I was, again, rehearse and practice. It's not always like it is in your head. This is good advice for me too, because when I'm putting these together, I'm not thinking it's a lot until I'm sitting in front of this computer talking and I'm like, holy shit, am I still talking? Anyway, I'm sure that there's some stuff in here you'll want to Google and deep dive on. If you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. You can reach me on Patreon. You can email me directly, Michelle at graveintentionsgoods.com. You can reach out to me on Etsy Convo. I'm on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. I'm everywhere. Find me, ask me your questions. I don't mind, explaining things further. I just don't want to eat up too much time. I just kind of want to keep things brief and give you kind of a light overview so you can decide what you want to dive deeper into or what you want to incorporate or what sounds like it might work for you. I don't want to give you too much to chew. I don't want you choking. I just want to give you a little bite so you salivate and maybe, look at incorporations here to beef up your practice and to work your wind horse, right? Your shamanic wind horse. And again, this is part of sacred sexuality. And in sex magic, it's hard to get away from the visualization of sex, right? And sex is great. But part of sacred sexuality is this historical, mythological, these practice points, these rituals, not just individual rituals, but group rituals, using the LRP, working our wind horse, working with magical items, working with enlivened instruments. It's not just masturbating or, having a statue to, Isis that we're leaving apples on. There's so much more. And especially in shamanism, that the sacred sexuality actually came from Tungusic shamanism. A lot of the sex magic practices, the golden shadow, the prereq work into the golden shadow. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I have babbled on more than long enough. I would love your feedback. Let me know what you think about the series. Let me know what you would like to learn about. Is there something you would like me to do a series on or a lesson on or a video on? Please let me know. I appreciate any and all feedback. Other than that, stay magical. I'm almost lost my voice tonight.